Hi, I'm Marilee Mazza again, the corporate correspondent for the Gonzo journalism site We Do the Work. So we're going to continue our series now, talking about some of the CEOs, particularly of the local Minneapolis, St. Paul health systems. But, we can expand that on to any location because they all work the same way. Our first shot is going to be Penny Wheeler, who's an MD and runs the Allina system. Let's talk a little bit about, how people get in that position, what happens when they do, why do they make those decisions, and then how does their world change and what is their viewpoint and how is it different when you get in that kind of what's called the C-suite, the corporate suite. Penny is an MD herself, an OB-GYN. So she worked her way up into various positions, starting with, let me take a look at my notes, when she became chief medical officer in 2006, and then from there she went into president and CEO of Allina. So let me tell you why somebody would make that jump, because it's not because they want to create peace in the world or healthcare for everyone. They make the jump because at some point they say to themselves, why am I busting my ass for next to no money? I mean, I could be doing a lot more and I could be making a lot more. It's really simple. And women are no different than men. They make the same decision. So at some point you make that decision, you jump that shark and you go into management. I believe that's what she did. And I did a lot of research on her and I did a lot of digging. And a lot of what you find with some of these corporate CEOs is a lot of puff pieces from professional magazines and journals and consulting companies. And so I found an interesting one on the advisory board, which does healthcare consulting. Again, a puff piece and not something normally regular people would read. And it said this: they told her she was too empathetic of a leader. Now Penny Wheeler runs a 13-hospital, $3.5 billion system. This is a puff piece for women. Women always come out of the box and say they're empathetic. We'll talk about that in a minute in terms of the nurses' strike in 2016. This is how women want to portray themselves. And so they try this tactic. It doesn't work with me because once you get in that C-suite, it doesn't matter. I mean, you're putting on a front for people and telling them something that isn't actually true. So let's talk a little bit about her career and her leadership style, because I found one good quote that I thought would be interesting given this particular situation. She was discussing with this reporter, again, a professional publication, not something anybody rank and file would see. She said, quote, I hope that I bring that empathy in the right way as a caregiver to really say, okay, we're instituting this or we're getting this changed. Here's the key one. First of all, we're really, really, really trying to have the people who are next to the patient's elbows drive the change in our organization. If it doesn't come from them, then we don't know enough about their work to know how to drive change. Very interesting, since they're harassing the employees and the frontline health workers in their hospitals now. Let's talk a little bit about what else Penny did as the CEO. First of all, I believe it was 2017, they did a kind of a joint venture, making a for-profit operation with Aetna as a health insurance, combining Allina and Aetna for a health insurance provider. Sheer money, but of course the bullshit that came out about that was all about patient care. You get into a lot of the business baffle gab, and I've certainly read a lot about that because a lot of these interviews, again, are in professional publication. Let's talk a little bit about the nurses' strike in 2016. So basically here you're running this operation. I mean, you can call it a not-profit, but it's profit-driven, just like everything else in healthcare. And you go after the nurses' healthcare plans because you really need to drop money to the bottom line. So why not go after your frontline workers? Now look what we're facing at this point. We're facing people whose health insurance is aligned with their job, and most people don't have any anymore because they've all been laid off based on the decisions that these corporate executives made not to stockpile any PPE. But anyway, she was looking out for the bottom line of Allina and went after the nurses' healthcare plans, and apparently got a pretty good deal out of that for herself and for her hospital chain. The other interesting thing, this one really blew me away. On March 5th of this year, now the COVID virus is raging across the globe, and it's coming right at us, and we're getting our first cases here in the US. And there's a press release from a company called Cedar in New York. It turns out that Penny has joined the board of directors of a tech startup of a company named Cedar that does tech for the healthcare industry. Actually, this application they're working on and developing is a collection system, bill collection system, and we'll show some shots of that. Why does somebody want to be on the board of directors of a healthcare system? Well, first of all, there's a lot of accolades to that. You're cool, even though you're an older woman like I am, you're in the cool place. But the second thing is when you join the board of directors of a startup, your usual payoff for that is you get what's called an equity stake. And an equity stake means you get stock in that company. So when that company, assuming they eventually do an initial public offering, meaning they register on one of the stock exchanges, you can sell your stock and make a shitload of money. So basically, it's all about the money. So let's get right to that bottom line. And this really shocked me because this took place on March 5th, 2020, right as all this shit was going down with COVID. I mean, I would run and hide from that. And by the way, I didn't see the announcement in the local paper. I saw it in professional publications and coming from this tech startup. So when you get into the situation and you start making this kind of money, 2.3 million she's making plus 800,000 in other compensation, probably massive payments into a pension plan, deferred compensation, not clear what that is. Then your social circle is other people who participate like you do, her corporate execs. And in fact, in one of these articles, she mentioned that she does a lot of biking with one of her best friends who's an executive at Best Buy. Well, here you go, whoever that is, there's 17 million people unemployed now. They ain't going to be buying any refrigerators, and they're not going to be buying any computers. So there you go. There's a little background on how that works, why people get into that gig, what they do when they're in it, and how they think when they're in it.
In your research and publications, did Wheeler ever address the issue of a pandemic, something that federal agencies and infectious disease experts have been writing about for 2 decades?
Did Ms. Wheeler ever address, or Dr. Wheeler ever address the issue of a possible pandemic when she was being interviewed for a lot of these articles? And so I did a pretty deep dive on that. I did a lot of searches, and basically I came up with nothing. She never mentioned it. She never talked about it. She never addressed it as a public health issue, although she's in the healthcare field. Couldn't find one. Maybe somebody else can find one, but I sure couldn't.
Did she ever address universal access to healthcare via Medicare for all or a national healthcare system?
Yes, another good question. Did she ever address the issue of healthcare for all or Medicare for all plan, or the issue of healthcare for people not connected to work or national plan? Because we see it right now. There's 17 million people unemployed and they're all losing their health insurance. Did she ever bring this up in the course of her interviews with these, again, professional type publications? And the answer is no. I couldn't find one instance where she talked about that, ever. So that's off the table, because again, it was a money-making operation, and that's all it is.
So would you say that her leadership was completely ignorant of a potential pandemic and the economic consequences of that?
Would she have been ignorant of a pandemic and the economic? How could you be ignorant of it? This has been written about for 2 decades now by federal agencies. In fact, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal today that said both Clinton and George W. Bush planned budgeting for a pandemic and talked about it. So you couldn't possibly have been ignorant of it, because you are in the healthcare field, and this is a healthcare and public health issue. So you couldn't have been ignorant of it. You just go, doesn't fit in with the corporate worldview. No money and storing ventilators and PPE didn't do it.
And finally, tell us a little bit about Sarah Krieger, who she is, and the recent video that you saw her featuring her in an interview.
Yeah, Sarah Krieger is one of the administrators, high-level administrators of Allina Health, and CEO and president of, I believe, Mercy and United Hospital Systems. And they're ones that seem to have the most issue harassing nurses. But anyway, she did an interview March 25th with the state rep, Zach Stevenson, and I happened to watch that. And one of her comments just struck me. Again, here's another person who's been in the healthcare field for multiple years and as an executive. And she was referring to the pandemic, the COVID virus, and she said, nobody could have dreamt that this would happen.
Healthcare systems work with the Department of Health, local counties to stand up, train, and be prepared for emergencies such as this. We never dreamt something like this would come up specifically, but we know emergencies happen, and we use what's called a incident command structure, a HIC structure that everybody uses the same language.
Now, how are you in this field for that many years, in that kind of a position, working your way up and making that kind of money? She's $1 million a year too, by the way. And you claim you have never had any knowledge. Nobody could have dreamt this would happen when the information was all out there. It was there.
And so what would you say about the confidence the frontline workers should have in these types of people now that they are ass deep in a global pandemic?
Well, confidence in these kind of people, I mean, the first thing I can see is that they're lying. Because basically what they did is they made a business trade-off for their own careers and their own enhancement and their own money and prestige, whatever they get out of it, and ignored the possibility of a pandemic and what would have needed to happen, certainly at the local healthcare system level, and they totally ignored it. And so how can you believe somebody who, that's a lie. They didn't know, and if you didn't know, you are incompetent.
So what, finally, let's wrap up here, but finally, what, based on a medical and a public health care perspective, what role should CEOs and business tycoons hold in a national healthcare system?
They should have no role at all, none, because we're seeing the complete meltdown, the complete failure of a profit-based healthcare system, and it's melted down the entire economy now. They should have absolutely no role at all.
Any final thoughts or additional shout-outs?
Oh gosh, an additional shout out. Let's say something to all the people who run their own businesses. The hairdressers, the lawyers, the restaurants, the dentists, everybody else who's out of business at this point and sitting with no money and no income because the U.S. was unprepared in a for-profit healthcare system to take care of an expected pandemic. I'm Marilee Mazza, and I'm the corporate correspondent for the Gonzo journalism site We Do the Work.
Betty here, now to tell you what you can do after all of this. If you are a frontline worker, we definitely want to hear from you. We want to hear what's going on in your workplace. How are you being pushed around? What's going on with your managers and your executive officers? Reach out to us. Let us know. Contact wdtw@gmail.com. Or you can go to our website, wdtw.org, click on that little forum icon at the top, and start talking about everything that's going on at your place of work. There are plenty of people out there who have the same stories, I'm sure. If you're a member of the community and or a frontline worker, you can go to these people's social media accounts. Let's go to Penny Wheeler's Twitter, Facebook, the Allina Health Facebook page. It's all good. Post your comments, take screenshots, send the screenshots so we do the work. That's all I got. See ya.